Welcome to Reconciling SaaS, the interview series where I talk to accountants with innovative business models and growth strategies who are showing what success looks like in and outside of the industry. I'm Guy Pearson. I'm a recovering accountant. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Ignition. And today we're joined by my very dear friend, Steph Hinds, founder of Growthwise, director at Camplify, and a general partner at Melt Ventures. Welcome. Steph, I've got so many questions. Can you tell me how you ended up A, being an accountant, and then B, starting Growthwise?
So the accountant one is actually quite funny. In high school, I had a tutor that I was actually being tutored in maths for some advanced stuff. I ended up helping him tutor some younger kids. And he said to me, "My brother is an accountant. You should go and work for him. You'd be a great accountant." And so I went and did work experience in my school holidays in year 12, absolutely loved it. And they said to me, "Do you want a job? Start the day you finish high school." And so that's what I did, which is a very long time ago. But it was something I fell into and I loved. Growthwise came about. I worked with that firm for 5 years, which was phenomenal, fantastic base, really, really good training. Worked with another firm for nearly 5 years and then decided, you know what, let's go and explore the big wide world and see what I can do to make my own kind of mark on accounting and what I thought was important for small businesses. And I was lucky I also had worked with Alan Spicer, who is the other partner at Growthwise. I actually have worked with Alan for my entire life. So he was already at the firm when I went to have my very first day as an accountant, and we've worked together ever since.
Hold on. So there were no gaps? Did you two interview as a pair? Like, how did that happen?
We didn't. He already had a job. So he'd started to work there, I think 4 months before I started, which was good for him, I guess. And then when I came on board, we just had a great friendship. He was really interested in doing super, so had gone down that path and was even looking at financial planning as a potential, as we were kind of, growing up in accounting. And then he circled back and said, "No, I still want to do business-related work as well." And we literally have never left each other's side.
Perfect. Big shout out to Alan. Hope you enjoy this and have a good giggle when you watch/listen to this. Okay, so Growthwise comes out, and how is it going to be different from the accounting firm, the accounting firm you just departed?
So I was really interested in doing more on a regular basis. So I am definitely a recovering tax person. I love how you say you're a recovering accountant, right? Tax is something that has to be done, but is not something I love to do, the technical side of things. I really enjoyed the business side of it. So, getting down into the nitty-gritty, working out how to improve a business, working on strategies for actual expansion and scale, or even simple things like how to operationally improve what's actually going on. So I wanted to be more involved. And there were a couple of things I toyed as I was, progressing my first 10 years as an accountant. Do you go into industry and therefore work inside a business? But I also liked variety and being able to help more than one person. And so I was like, oh, I don't think that's really for me. And one of the things that we wanted to do with starting Growthwise is actually be able to help people at the beginning of their journey in business. And so we created an LPlaters program, and it was designed to basically say, okay, when you're in business, when you learn to drive a car, as an example, you start with L plates, you go to P plates, then you go to your black license. And that's actually what we modeled Growthwise's services on. That, everyone who is brand new in business starts on their L plates. They have some education program. They get their hand held for a whole host of stuff, and they graduate to be a P plater. And then finally they graduate to be, a black ninja, therefore a black license in business. And that was one of the things I was really passionate about, that I wanted to be able to do in that education pathway and be involved and internal to a business, not just sitting saying, here's tax, or, you know, here's a quarterly set of accounts.
For sure. Now, can you do me a favor? Can you move to your left? Because I feel like part of your branding is like, yeah, oh, wow, look, there's a P plate right there. Imagine that. So this is the middle step, right?
The middle step. I'm in the middle room. I'm allowed to graduate to P's.
Oh wow. Do you filter your clients in terms of which room they're allowed in by what plan they're on or stage they're at?
We actually don't, but I did have, surprisingly, our designer who did all of this work for us. When he came to me, he, was by himself. He hadn't really grown from a business perspective in terms of having more employees, etc. And one of the things that resonated was he said to me, I want to get out of the L plate room. And I looked at him and I was like, wow, we're sitting in the L platers room right now. And so he, in his mind, wanted to get to the Black Ops room. And I was like, that's really good.
Cool. And so you and Alan spin up a website, come up with a name, a bit of a method to the madness, so to speak, with sort of the 3 steps, if you like, and the education piece along the way. What happens next? Because I think website wise, we've known each other forever, I feel like. So it's like 2011. So I think we both were 18 months probably into our journey before we actually met in person. And prior to that, we were probably painting targets on each other's back in a lovely, friendly way, being like, I want my website or I want my X to be better than, in my case, Steph's. Or I hadn't met Alan at that point, but like it was always like I want to win. Right? It doesn't mean I want you to lose. I just want to win. So what was that next step? Like you two were like, here's the game plan. What was the first thing you do to get your first client?
Well, luckily we had obviously worked in a business beforehand. One of those clients said, I don't actually want to go to anybody else, and came across to us. It was a very big shock when I was 26 or 27. And when you're that age, I think you just assume that you can conquer the world with no issues, right? So we didn't have fees. We didn't have any clients. We weren't going to purchase any fees. We were literally going to do everything from scratch. And so we started by networking in Newcastle and talking to as many business owners as we could. And one by one, we were just bringing on clients gradually. And funnily enough, when you sit back and have a look at that whole entire kind of 3 years of pounding the pavement and making sure you were at every event and talking to as many people as possible, we've actually then been able to build an amazing community here in Newcastle, just of business owners who were going through the exact same problems, dramas, excitement that we were. And I think in the end, it's worked out really nicely, but my God, were we naive in the beginning to just think, you just put a website up, it's going to be fine, right? So yeah, that part I don't recommend anyone just think that they can stick something up and be good to go. But I will say that community stuff really did work well for us.
100%. Do you think you'd started all exactly the same way again, or would you do something differently?
No, now I actually have lived and breathed that, and you know what it's like to start a business from scratch. And so I definitely wouldn't change our branding. I definitely wouldn't change what we wanted the business to stand for. I think that's one thing that we did get right. And I'm very comfortable and happy to say we got that right. We've obviously refined 1,000 times from the beginning what it was like to what it is now. The thing that I would do differently is I would probably have a good niche that we were going after to start with. In the beginning, it literally was just, let's go and talk to as many people as we possibly can. And now I think the benefit of hindsight, there are certain types of people and certain types of businesses and stages of business and wants that they, are striving for, that I think suit us well. And so I'd go into it with much more knowledge around who you were targeting and why you were targeting them.
Yeah, for sure. So when we both first started our firms, roughly like within 6 months of each other, I think. Obviously, technology's changed a little bit in the last, without aging us, 14 years thereabouts. Is there anything that's currently like just being released that you're like super excited about for its level of impact it's going to have on the accounting industry?
Well, I think, first of all, I remember having conversations with you way back in the day, and we were so excited about what Xero was actually doing for the accounting community and, what we were able to do for clients that we couldn't do before when we were, waiting for that floppy disk or CD to come in.
Yep.
And very first, our conversations was all around when is this entire base of accounting going to be automated? And you and I had all of these conversations about, it's coming really quickly. We're not going to need to do any of this stuff anymore. And quite excited about it. And I sit back now near 15 years later, and I'm still waiting, right? I'm still waiting for the day when accounting is automated, because that's what we were literally promised right at the beginning of this beautiful cloud journey. And so I've learned in this time period to kind of just understand some things will move really quickly, other things won't. Again, naive, young, you just expect that things will go so fast. Now I'm actually excited about things like OpenAI and ChatGPT, not because I think it's going to completely revolutionize what we do as accountants, but because it's enabled us to solve little things that are just annoying. So we've always lived by the motto, eliminate first, automate second, delegate third. It's just this thing that has always been in my head. Most people, as you're growing, you just think about delegating. Who can I hire to do that job for me? Or, exciting, there's a piece of software, let's actually get that sorted. Eliminate is actually more important first than those two things. And so things like ChatGPT now just allow us to eliminate things that we had to do previously, or that you had to hire someone to do, that are little in business. And so it's simple things like filing. We don't file anything. We don't print. So I'm talking about electronic filing. Just
you're in the former compactor room right now, right?
but we don't print. We're not talking about paper files, but simple things like filing. We've just been able to build scripts that literally will auto-file every single document that needs to be filed in our office. And those little things where, our admin team can literally go and do exciting things. They don't have to do those base level tasks anymore.
So Growthwise is now 14 years. Alan is still probably snickering in the room, behind you, probably. I know you've got, we talk about, Bo's there helping to run the show as well. Like, what has been your biggest learning about a firm owner? And obviously you've stepped out into other businesses, which we'll get to, but I'm sure there's a couple of clients knowing you that you love that you like, I'm still going to do those. But my guess is like, you've actually stepped out and become an owner of an accounting firm that kind of works there. How did that happen? How do you feel about it? And what was the biggest sort of change that allowed for that to happen?
I think, especially as I've gotten older, the last 5 years in particular, I've realized that I'm not good at a lot of things. And when you have that realization that you're actually not good at a lot of things, and you can pinpoint things you are helpful in and what you need around you, you can then build a good team. And so Alan is amazing technically. He's great with clients. He's a fantastic other half for me from a business owner perspective, because we have the same ethics and morals and likes of wine and gin as well, which is very helpful. But he is brilliant technical. Growthwise. And so I would never, ever be able to compete with what he can do in that accounting space and being able to, you know, run the complex things that happen in our business. Bo is very good operationally. He just has that brain that, you know, can get everything done, can fix problems, can talk to clients. And so I'm not as good at that as what he is, in which case I definitely should get out of the road. You're right. I have a couple of clients that I just love talking to. And to be fair, at Growthwise, my job is more actually dealing with the clients and being on that side of things than it really is anything to do with the business side of things. And so that's very rewarding for me. I enjoy it a lot. But I definitely would say I didn't think that that was the role I was going to play 10 years ago, right? I would have told you, you know, I'm going to be the person running Growthwise. Well, oh, how things change. But for me, it's been all about learning what you're good at, what you enjoy, and what other people around you are also really, really good at, and letting them fly in that example.
Perfect. And I imagine a big part of that is trusting and enabling your team rather than delegating, to your point necessarily. It's third, but it's like letting them come up and innovate as well. And as a subtle plug, having a good business model and cash flow solution. But we can get to that another time. It makes all the world's problems go away in terms of how do you actually improve and innovate on your business. On top of running Growthwise, and this is probably something that I was ignorant to, I knew you were a Camplify's accountant. I didn't know that someone's mentioned to me perhaps you were a co-founder, and I don't want to get into any trouble here, but is that a correct statement?
No, definitely not. So I was an investor in Camplify
cool.
at the beginning because, fun fact, Camplify went through the Slingshot Accelerator program when Justin had nothing but a beautiful slide deck, but nothing but a slide deck. And I had worked with, perfect. I'd worked with Trent and Craig all the way through Slingshot Accelerator program, doing the financial modeling for all of the startups in that program, doing all of the setups and kind of being involved in the whole back office. And so I luckily got to be an investor from day one, which was great. And then we did the internal accounting for Camplify as they were growing. One of the team who was still here started his very first job was Camplify. Got to the point where, you know, he was working full time basically for Camplify. And then they have grown immensely. I joined the board in 2017, I think, and went through an IPO process with them. We would need alcohol to discuss the IPO process and how involved that is. Much like capital raising in general, but, you know, just a lot more red tape. So that was a fun process to be involved in, to be fair. A lot of it was a very good experience, and I have stayed on the board.
Great. And for those who don't know, what is Camplify?
Camplify is Airbnb for caravanning. So you can literally hire a caravan from Camplify and, you know, take it anywhere you like in Australia, in Germany, in the UK, pretty much all throughout Europe, New Zealand. So we've grown from being a tiny little business here to being truly a global, quite large business.
Awesome. Now, I remember, I'm not exactly sure of the first conversation, so I'm going to switch over to Melt Ventures. So first off, and I think I said this to you at the time, but incredibly proud of you for doing this. So I love your career path, and I know I'm an observer and once again like a frenemy from afar, but I just think it's epic. And so I think we had a chat, and you were like, all these venture funds exist for doing software, which is, you know, quote unquote the easy thing because you don't actually need to physically build and ship it good or come up with something that people are tangibly going to use. And you're like, I'm pretty sure you used profanity, so it's like, that's BS. I want to help people solve the hard problems that fix some of the world's problems. And there was it wasn't really a pitch deck at the time, but this is sort of what you were not proclaiming, but basically telling me about. And I was like, this is not going to be an easy journey in my head, but knowing you and your amount of gusto and everything else, I was like, if anyone could do it, and I think you had I'm probably going to misremember this, someone who was associated with Slingshot coming along for the journey. So like someone who'd been involved with funds and fundraising. And so the two, and obviously, business models. So it's sort of like, okay, this could work. And you got it off the ground. And so could you introduce Melt Ventures to us and explain us exactly what it does, if I don't stuff it up?
Okay, so Melt Ventures is about, it's a VC firm and it's designed to fund hardware startups in Australia. So we're about creating the hard things, and surrounding yourself with the right people is probably the biggest lesson that I've learned in business across all this time. So Trent, who's the other general partner of Melt Ventures, started Slingshot Accelerator way back in 2014, and I've had the pleasure of working with him for that whole entire time. Trent is also a Novocastrian, so I'm a Novocastrian. We love Newcastle and we love the surrounding area. And because we live here, we get exposure to a lot of manufacturing-based businesses and a lot of energy-based businesses, because the Hunter Valley is obviously mining country and has been the biggest exporter of energy in Australia, for a very, very long time. And so as we were delving into, we've done software investing, it's kind of a crowded space. There's a lot of stuff in there and not a lot of exciting stuff for us. We thought, what else could we do around the edges here? At that time, Slingshot had had quite a few pitches from hardware-based companies. And because of their thesis, they actually couldn't invest in those companies. And so in 2020, there were a few little trusts set up just to test the waters for the differences in actually investing in hardware businesses as opposed to software. Because as accountants, everyone would understand hardware businesses have true COGS, right? This is big costs. Cash flow is vastly different than running a SaaS-based business or any form of tech business, because you have physical things that you need to make, produce, store, have inventory for, raw materials, the whole box and dice. And so we just set about testing the waters to see what was out there. There were quite a few good companies who ended up coming to us. And at that same point in time, Trent is actually an environmental scientist by trade. He doesn't like me to tell anyone that. So sorry, Trent, when you listen to this. And at the time had surrounded himself with an amazing engineer who just happens to be one of the most incredible people I've ever met at solving physical problems and business problems. And so there was industrial designers, and this bunch of guys were actually seeing what they could do in this space for hardware startup businesses, taking them through a 6-month proper acceleration program, teaching them how to actually prove out the model, how to do things from a rapid response perspective. And they'd set up with the government a little prototyping facility and lab in Warners Bay. It was kind of this mini facility, so that we could actually get this whole region and Hunter Valley basically testing and prototyping, trying to get throughput so that it wasn't, trying to send stuff to China all the time to go, can you please make this 30-cent widget? Let's come back and test it. Oh, we need this changed, blah, blah. And that then ended up being a huge facility over the last couple of years, has now been built in Muswellbrook. The PM opened a couple of months ago now. How time flies when you're having fun. And so Melt is now this full service where we have the fund that will do investments in hardware-based startups. But we also have this prototyping lab where businesses who are startups, but they don't have to be startups, can go and test products, can play with some of the most amazing equipment I've ever been able to see, some amazing robots, and really try and fast track what's happening in that hardware space in Australia as much as we possibly can. So lots of learning, but the fund is set up and we are 5 investments in with another few in DD at the moment. So it's incredibly rewarding, very hard, as you would imagine, because there's a lot more that goes into it, but we're having fun. That's
great. And so from the website, we've got MGA Thermal, Endure, Allegro Energy, Refilled, SafeGauge, and apologies if I've messed up in the pronunciation, because I know sometimes people put accents on things and whatnot. But is there any specific qualities, characteristics you look for on the founders in their presentations, or is it prototype only that's kind of you need to come with something that you've built, even if it's kind of working, as like the example of what you're trying to do? Like, what's the pitch process like? Because software is presentation deck, GIF demo of app, traction, users, commentary, where you sit in the market, right? But I imagine part of the challenge on a physical VC model is it's like, have you actually attempted to make one of these things? Is it possible?
Yep, that is definitely the same. And look, at its core, it's the whole same process, right? So you still need to have everything else that a normal SaaS business would have. What we look for is that there's actually some starting process. So none of those businesses had complete working prototypes at all. What they did have was some good theory, some good IP. They had actually started the process, and they also had really, really good knowledge on the industry. And it's not the same for every single one of those businesses, but at the very, very early stage, we're still looking for good knowledge in the industry that you're trying to get into, so that we know kind of that starting process. The good part about having a prototyping lab is it's actually very quick now in comparison to test some of those ideas. So one of the startups that we're currently working with, we're actually working with them before investment stage, right? To make sure that they are actually investable and are ready to be invested in at the same time. So I think that's the big difference. The time frame is definitely a little bit longer, and we can help in that initial stage before they actually need to get to the pitching to other investors, as an example, because we have that facility and that lab there in the first place.
Awesome. And so, if I think about the investments that I've made, a big part of that is like, do I back the founder? Do I think they have some grit? Do I think they understand the industry? That vision and that sort of founder, let's call it grit, determination, like how big a piece of that is, the investment thesis, particularly given how you just described it, that they may not even have a working prototype. So you kind of have to believe in them, right?
It's massive. And the funny component of this is every single one of those, certainly the MGA, Endure, and Allegro, which is our medium-term storage kind of 3 in that space of startups. The founders in those businesses are, multi-PhD, absolutely amazingly smart, very smart individuals. And the thing we look for in that is that they can actually commercialize, because a lot of people who have this, amazing ability to come up with some of these ideas, no one's really taught how to commercialize at university, as an example. And so one of the things we do look for is that either there's someone else on the team that is coming in from a commercialization perspective, or that the founders actually do know how they're going to commercialize these products. So it's very different, again, than SaaS generally from that perspective, because you do have, we are talking a lot about science and engineering. In some instances, definitely not, but there is definitely a big science and engineering component. The other thing that we do is throughout our due diligence process, obviously standard DD that happens, but we really do involve Clint Bruin, who is our principal engineer, and he will go and do that nitty-gritty process with them as a DD process before we're investing. And that is very helpful to have on the back end, because we then know, okay, yes, this potentially could be built, or we could do something around the edges here from that engineering perspective.
Cool. That's exciting. And so I cannot remember the size of the fund. Apologies for that. But what's your typical investment size, and how long is the investment cycle? So, a stereotypical fund will raise a fund and look to deploy within 3 years, reserve some for follow-on, and then probably go and raise the next fund. That's sort of typical order of operations. And obviously the money isn't all yours, right? So you have people who've given you the money, so you have to give it back to them at some point, with a profit. That's the idea. And so in that model, how many companies are you looking for each fund? Like, what's sort of the ideal state that you think you'll sort of construct your first portfolio with?
Yeah, so first portfolio will be 15 to 20 investments, to be fair, deploying, up to $1 million in each company, small checks to start with, and then obviously follow on from that perspective. It is very similar to a normal VC fund. We do expect that the first 3 years will be deploying everything that we kind of have, with the exception of a bit more for follow-on. The difference is we think most of our exits in the beginning are likely to be trade sale style exits as a potential. Obviously, some of them might not be, but there is a lot of interest from some larger customers and organizations in some of these businesses, which is quite fun for us at the beginning. Knowing that you've got good partners on board is very helpful. It is not a crowded space though. So out of the 106 ESVCLPs in Australia, there are 3 of us who are actually doing something to do with manufacturing and hardware. So it's definitely not a crowded space. And so we do get a lot of interest from startups, and we are going to be a small fund. We won't do any more than 20 mil. Technically, our fund is still open, but we'll do a final close at 20 mil and kind of then think about, yes, fund 2 later down the track. But let's just stick with fund 1 today.
The other 2, are they at the same kind of stage and check size as you all, or do they act as a feeder fund, or a fund that perhaps you could see your existing companies raising from for an expansionary round after?
So a bit of both. We do obviously do a lot of investing as well alongside Main Sequence, which is CSIRO's fund. So in the medium-term storage energy style scenario, CSIRO has a brilliant program itself, and Main Sequence is a fantastic fund that has a lot of money, obviously. So that is a great pathway for all of those brand new startups, especially to get next round.
Okay, great, awesome. I'm glad that it's not that money from Australia is the only route necessarily, but it's awesome that it's staying to a certain extent homegrown as it looks to scale up. I always think about all the things that we invent, whether it's things in solar particularly or Wi-Fi, and how we just struggled to commercialize it and sold it off perhaps a little bit too early, and sell off the IP in that respect as well. So it's awesome. Now, I'm trying to bring it all together. So we've got accountant to accounting firm, breaking the mold, big green logo behind you with an alien. Did you say an alien with a P plate on him? So we've got your personality kind of wedged throughout the whole branding there in a positive light. We've got Melt Ventures, which is something also unconventional. Once again, as you said, one of 3 out of 106 in the one country. And then along the way, you decided that you really liked camper van holidays and you wanted to help them with their numbers, and now sit on a listed board helping them do M&A, which is, I think, part of how they expanded overseas. Explain that to me, how that all makes sense. Like, I can have a stab at it, and also you've invested in things along the way, being alongside Slingshot. So tell me the straight line story. Like, tell me how this all makes sense in a normal trajectory.
Well, I don't think I do straight lines, so that's probably not going to help in this scenario. And again, I'll bring it back to just surrounding yourself with super smart people who actually want help, and me just putting my hand up and saying, yep, I'll give that a go and I'll figure it out as I go along. And so, you know, I don't have public ASX listed board experience as an example. I obviously have very in-depth knowledge of the entire growth of Camplify from effectively day one. So that knowledge is incredibly valuable, but you know, I don't have prior experience on a board like that. So it's a crash course in going through an IPO and getting to that level. And so for me, I like learning new things. I enjoy being outside of a comfort zone. And I think that that just suits my personality, in that I'm willing to give most things a go. I'm willing to say, I actually don't know what I'm talking about, but I'm going to go down this rabbit hole and try and find as much information as I can, and, you know, try and do obviously the best job that I can, but it's just giving things a go.
One of your biggest fans. I know we haven't caught up in some time. But if I can, I want to switch it up and help people get to know you a little bit better. So I've got some fill in the blank questions. Being Steph, my favorite thing to do on a vacation is
visit gin distilleries and vineyards.
Is there a favorite location you've been to for that?
South Australia for sure.
Okay, awesome. On the weekend, you'll find me.
Oh, wow. That is not something I can answer. In the garden, running around doing something on a farm somewhere, outside.
Okay. Concert or sporting event?
Definitely concert. Remember, I told you, don't ask sport questions.
I know, but I've asked everybody. I'm not going to dig in on the sports side, the concert side. That favorite concert you've ever been to?
I don't have a favourite, but I did just go to Morgan Evans and James Johnson 2 months ago, and it was amazing in Newcastle. Yes.
And my last question to fill in the blanks is my favourite camper van holiday was to where?
South Australia.
Okay. Was that the same in gin distill and camper van, did you? Or you were walking in between? Maybe it's not for the podcast, maybe it's not for this.
No, Alan, Bo and I go away for the whole month of February every year, and sometimes a little bit of March as well. And we had a aim 3 years ago to visit every single wine region of Australia. So that's what we've been doing for the last few years. And South Australia is still the favourite.
Awesome. Cannot disagree with that at all. It's beautiful down there. So as I alluded to before, want to give you some time to share what's going on in your world, what your plan for 24. So without further ado, Steph, and thank you for joining us today. The floor is yours.
For me, it's much of the same. So I actually love splitting my time between Melt Ventures, Growthwise, and Camplify. I think what I do in Camplify and Melt helps for Growthwise. It certainly helps me grow and learn and be able to impart that knowledge back to everybody else. So that's what you'll find me doing for 2024. Lots of hopefully good and exciting Melt things in the pipeline as well. So much of the same. There'll be some, you know, travel and excitement thrown in there as well.
Perfect. Well, Steph, thanks so much once again for joining us from Growthwise HQ.
I'd just like to say thank you for putting this together. I've absolutely loved our friendship and rivalry over the last few years. It's amazing to see what you've been able to do from going from, you know, that accounting business owner to running a SaaS business. I think there are a lot of accountants who definitely look up to you and strive to be able to do what you've done as well. So I'm a massive Ignition fangirl. Love what you have done. You've certainly helped us immensely. So thank you very much for being awesome.
Oh, you're making me blush now. I think I just spilled my water too, but it's been my absolute pleasure. Like I said, frenemies, friends, always someone to compete against and let me know that I'm not being lazy. So I've honestly appreciated the last 12 years. The last few too, but 12 in total. It's been awesome. Thanks, Steph.